Hi everyone, good evening. We're just going to wait another couple of minutes and then get started. Thank you for joining. We'll just wait a minute more and then get started. I think you should be able to see the screen now. Okay, thank you, Gandharv, for confirming. Your names. Okay, it's 4:05. Why don't we at least get started? Thank you everyone for joining, taking time on a weekday second half. So as you already know, we're going to talk about EV charging for communities. We're going to keep a slightly broader scope, and I'll tell you, what's to come. Before I get started, let me very quickly introduce myself. I'm Santosh, and I lead our growth and partnerships at Bolt Earth. Bolt Earth as a company itself, I'll talk about a little later in the presentation as well. But we are a smart EV tech company powering the EV ecosystem, including EV charging across the country and expanding to Southeast Asia now as well. That's kind of very brief intro. Coming to the topic itself, I know the topic was meant to be empowering communities with EV charging. I just kind of modified it a little because the empowerment part is in the hands of the people, and I've also had some experience in social impact in the past, and empowerment is a very it's a term that's heavy and difficult to achieve. And taking cognizance of that, I just made it more of EV charging for our communities. And so we're gonna talk about the emerging context of electric vehicles in the country a little bit, and what are the tailwinds, continuing headwinds, some misconceptions that may continue to exist. Then we're going to look at what are the emerging behaviors in EV charging. Also, a little bit of perspective from our own data, and then briefly talk about EV charging in communities. Which, for the context of this discussion, we're going to keep it a little broad. Typically, communities we assume are residential communities, but in this, we're going to talk about residential communities and to some extent workplaces as well. And after that, we're going to talk about at least what are our recommendations from our vantage point in terms of EV charging for communities, some punts on what we think is going to happen with respect to EV charging broadly, and then close out with hopefully a little bit of discussion and Q&A. Recommendations are welcome as well. And a lot of this is thanks to a lot of efforts across the ecosystem. There are some great people putting together data, policies, communication, and I also lean on the wisdom that our collective team members across Bolt Earth have taken a lot of inputs from them. They are the people who deal with the communities day in and day out. So that's just quick context. Why don't we dive right in? To start with the emerging context on EVs, I don't want to spend too much time on it because I assume that um, if you're here, that means you're somewhat a believer, at least. But maybe just to put things in perspective on at least why we as an organization, and I'm personally also bullish about EVs, the penetration and adoption. If you were to just quickly look back, it kind of started with the National Electric Mobility Mission Plan for 2020, launched many years ago, over a decade ago now, and then started with the FAME, which you know as the um, policy that gave concessions for end consumers through OEMs. Eventually, a lot of these policies got adopted by each state as well. Precipitation also started with the MOP guidelines, the Ministry of Power guidelines, which kind of allowed you to share power on commercial tariffs, as well as the MOA amendment to the model building bylaws in 2016. While it's not enforced across states, it does, take cognizance even, about 8 years ago in terms of asking for the provision of 20% of parking capacity in any building for it to provide a charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. Now, the premise, basically the building premises is also supposed to have some power load with a certain that equals all the charging points that are there, depending on what you install over there, and an additional 25%. So that is kind of the basis for a lot of buildings across the country. And like we saw in the last slide, there are a lot of states also that have taken this into their model building bylaws, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Telangana, and so on, both into the model building bylaws as well as the EV policies that were, also notified by different states and approved. Today, almost more than 25 states have either notified or have drafted and still haven't fully passed the electric vehicle policies. But there's a lot of positive momentum from the government by way of mandates and policies and notifications. An example of that at a state level, you can also see as the Maharashtra EV policy that was rolled out in 2021, which mandates 20% of new residential buildings to have parking EV ready, and for institutional and commercial complexes. So it's not just commercial complexes, but other institutions as well, for it to be 25+%. So some of these policies are mandated in the states today, say Maharashtra, Telangana, but there are, a lot of the builders, office administrators, and existing RWs and so on also subscribe to this and kind of future proof in terms of how they approach EV charging as we speak, with this as the basis. While it's not crystal clear at an individual building level, but a lot of them, it's safe to assume that this enforcement will continue and spread across states, and there's a lot of best practice sharing across states as we speak as well. That's on the government mandate side, and coming to the industry itself, the auto industry, corporates at large, and so on. If you look at the number of models that can be sold basis the uh, after ARI certification, there are about 87 two-wheeler models that are being sold today, about 37 three-wheeler models, 27 in terms of goods, and almost 33 car and SUV brands as well. So there is a lot of action going on in terms of the choice for end customer as well. And a lot of the automotive OEMs have committed in terms of manufacturing, and the government has also provided PLI schemes for the manufacturing and incentivizing local manufacturing. Most recently, you would have also seen that there is an import duty reduction in import of four-wheeler EVs above, I think, $35,000 or something as well. So, further boost to the EV choice to consumers across segments. Of course, while this is somewhere in between government policy and um, industry, the GST has been reduced effective 2019 itself to be 5%, both for electric vehicles and the charging stations that are counted in the bracket of EVSE, electric vehicle supply charging equipment, or the DC charging stations. So, and also the hiring of electric buses are exempt from GST as well. So there is further impetus in that sense. Some of you would have seen the price cuts announced by EV companies, both two-wheelers and four-wheelers, just as of February. And what that indicates to is the narrowing difference between costs of battery-powered versus ICE vehicles. It is true that high upfront cost has been a deterrent for some with respect to EV adoption, but that is definitely improving with the launch of affordable models, particularly in two-wheeler space, and in four-wheeler space. More launches are yet to happen, slated for this year and next year. And what's happening is that as the sector is seeing scale, the battery costs are also decreasing, and you're getting them for cheaper, and that is and the OEMs are also passing on that benefit to the customer. Of course, it's also important to note a lot of the corporate policies and their own net zero commitments and commitment to sustainability as corporates, incentivizing and already transitioning part or all of their fleets, the employee transport fleets, particularly in the cities and towns, to incentivize a transition to EVs. Also, incentives in terms of allowing their employees to purchase EVs, and kind of offsetting some of that cost, or providing incentives for the same. And companies that have fleets of their own, logistics fleets, and so on, almost all of them have committed to a near 100% transition by 2030. So that's further tailwinds that we see in terms of the industry angle of policies and commitments that are kind of that tell us that it is a point of no return now in terms of EV adoption. Okay, if all of this may not still make sense, but we should still believe the consumer, right? And the consumer has spoken. They have the verdict is out there for any emerging technology, about 5% penetration or 5% adoption is the point of no return. That's generally what is the consensus at a tech industry level. And if you look at the EV sales and the growth rate, if that is anything to go by, then I think we definitely believe that we are over the tipping point. It's not that we are in the tipping point. The tipping point is already behind us. And that is where you can see that the penetration now across vehicle categories cumulatively is almost 6.8% this year. That means out of every 100 vehicles that are getting sold, about 6 to 7 are already EVs. That's obviously much higher in the three-wheeler segment and the two-wheeler segment. And the four-wheeler segment is soon going to catch up as well. And so last year, cumulatively, more than 1.5 million electric vehicles have been sold across the country. So that's the verdict is clear, and we just have to brace for it. Now, what does it mean for the future as well, right? If you take the 30% adoption until year-on-year growth, or CAGR, you can call it, to 2030, that is the green line that you see there. That means in 2030, about 7 million new vehicles, EVs, will be on the roads. So that is, even as the production, as the projections go, and there is a, even if you take a somewhat pessimistic scenario, then that still means about 5 million new vehicles will come out of the roads, not far from now, in just about 5 years. So that's kind of what the numbers tell us, and what, even having said that, there still continue to be some questions in people's minds when it comes to ownership of EVs or charging. Some rightly so, and some I would bucket it more as misconceptions, with no disrespect to anybody. And I just wanted to highlight three quick ones there. And the reason I'm still talking about those in this forum is that I think sometimes there is a lot out there, and we can cherry pick some data, and then so as someone said, you can make data confess anything, right? So it's always guilty until proven innocent. So it's important to like take stock of what continue to be some of the misconceptions that some might have. And the first one is that EVs are expensive. Now, while this is a very broad blanket term, most people, what they mean when they say this is that a four-wheeler, if I want to purchase one, an EV is expensive. But now there are already some models existing, even in the four-wheeler segment, that you can purchase at about 7-8 lakh mark as well. And they're getting increasingly affordable. There are, and consumers will have a lot more choice soon as well. And sometimes what people mean when they say this is also that, okay, but what about the cost of the battery? If I have to replace it every few years or whatever that time frame might be, then that itself is a significant part of the vehicle cost. So I think the way to look at it from that perspective is that most of the vehicle manufacturers are giving at least 5 years, in particularly four-wheelers space, 5 to 8 years warranty, or certain amount of kilometers, etc. So that's one thing to look at. And battery technology has rapidly improved over the last couple of decades as well. And the second thing to note also is that the applications of batteries that are end of automotive life are also seeing uptick in terms of deployment. So there is good chance that just a few years from now, you will see that you will get good resale value for batteries at the end of life. Hopefully, that supply chain also gets sorted. They have applications in energy storage, and there are interesting pilots happening in terms of using them as energy storage and hooking them back to the grid, and so on. Or you can use it in home inverters and so on. So all of those are also coming up. With respect to two-wheelers, the gap is already very thin, and that's there are a lot of affordable models with good battery warranty um, in the market already. And if you look at the total cost of ownership, there are many calculators online in terms of you put fuel, maintenance, all of that. Then it's much easier to compare. While the upfront costs till now have slightly been higher, the total cost of ownership is still lower. So that's how at least one way to look at that part. And the second one is, all of us have heard of the one-off anecdote that is oft repeated. Someone, my aunt or uncle got stuck somewhere. What if that happens? That sort of thing. It's a very valid and fair concern, and it is unfortunate that it might have happened to somebody. But the reality is that most of the there's two types of people, like commuters. You can look at it, right? There is the daily commuter, and then there are people who depend on the um, mobility as a livelihood. This could be logistics, fleet riders, your gig workers, and so on. So if I just stick to the first part in terms of, let's say, daily commuters, about 75% of urban commuters actually do not go more than 35 kilometers in a day. And most two-wheeler batteries already provide a minimum of 60, 70 kilometers of range. So that is not something to be worried about too much. And even if um, let's say there is an emergency or so, now that you're never too far from a socket. Electricity is very democratized as opposed to somewhat more concentrated fuel stations, right? So you're never too far from getting some emergency charge, and more and more roadside assistance operators also provide some charging facility in the case that you do get stuck, in the unfortunate case that you do get stuck as well. So it's more of, range anxiety is more of lack of understanding of how charging is going to happen, and a little bit of I'll take the liberty to say fuel station hangover as well, which is the third thing that I want to talk about, which is, who has the time to charge, right? Okay, like some slow charging may take a few hours in the case of, yeah, let's say 3-4 hours in the case of a two-wheeler, much more, say 8 to 12 hours in the case of a four-wheeler. So who has the time to connect and wait is also something that we do hear sometimes. And that again is more like, if you think fuel stations, you're like, okay, I'm going to go there and charge my vehicle at a station. But since electricity is pretty democratized, it's in the building that you're sitting in right now. You can actually charge your vehicle during idle times. And the reality is, for daily commuters and for people who don't depend on mobility as a livelihood, the vehicle is parked like 90% of the time. Where's your vehicle now? It's parked. So that's the time to charge. People will charge overnight. People will do opportunity charging when you're at a cinema hall or a mall, or some at your gym. And that is generally going to emerge. It's kind of more towards the smartphone charging behavior in that sense. So that's something that as behavior we will see, we're already seeing, but we'll see much more of in terms of how vehicles will get charged. So that's just one thing. I thought we'll just get it out of the way. And coming to charging EVs in general, in terms of the different segments. We already spoke about daily commuters versus, let's say, livelihood mobility riders. So typically, daily commuters will charge at home and office, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But for others, then they may need more fast charging, whether you are driving, typically it's two-wheeler, three-wheeler, or four-wheeler. The commercial vehicle riders will need some sort of fast charging. So for the scope of this, I'm going to talk about predominantly the first category and the types of charging, just to cover some more basics before we jump ahead. Um, so all your two-wheelers can actually be charged on a 5 ampere socket also, like a 3-pin socket that is not far from you right now. If that's in your parking or in your basement, you can actually use a portable charger like your laptop adapter that you get, which typically has the AC/DC rectifier to connect into the wall socket and then charge your vehicle. What we but we do not recommend that. We strongly recommend using a smart AC charging socket so that it is safer. You have metering. You see actually how many units are getting dispensed, and it also protects your plug and the portable charger as well. So that's so you can kind of use any smart socket in terms of two-wheeler charging, AC charging, right? So typically it's a 3-pin. In some cases, if you see the third one here on the right, it's also an industrial socket. Some vehicle manufacturers give an industrial socket. Typically, they give a converter from industrial socket to 3-pin socket, or in the case of vehicle manufacturer side, an industrial plug to a 3-pin plug converter as well, right? So that you're able to charge it anywhere. The industrial sockets itself are not as prevalent as a 3-pin socket. So that's why, let's say you're stuck somewhere. If you try to find an industrial socket, you may not find it that easily as compared to a 3-pin socket. You can ask any hotel or even a small establishment for some emergency juice, right? So that's typically the AC charging side. And One thing to note though is that the portable charger or sometimes the converter or the onboard charger is on inside the vehicle. That usually limits how much power you can get from the socket. While any of the let's say 15 amp sockets can give up to 3.3 kilowatt of power, or 3.3 units of power. Usually the portable charger or the onboard charger limits it to about 750 to 950 watts in most cases. There are vehicles on the roads which can take more than that, 2 kilowatt, even 3.3 kilowatt as well. But by and large, it's limited. That's because you also want to keep how much current power you're providing to the battery under safe limits, if in case it doesn't have any active cooling mechanism or so on, right? So that's the AC charging part of things. So it's limited by the portable charger or the onboard charger. Having said that, there is DC charging, DC fast charging for two-wheelers. The two most popular already OEMs already provide fast charging, and they have their own deployments as well. And in case of more and more two-wheelers are starting to support fast charging as well. And there are two emerging standards for that. The one blue you see is called the Dash 6 or Type 6 connector. And there are some vehicles, while this is not fully published yet, there's a Type 7 or LECCS, and that will be published by BIS soon as well. That is for the DC charging of two-wheelers, where the batteries can actually take DC power. In this case, you can actually have you can get about 50 kilometers of charge in just about 15, 20 minutes as well. So that is something that is emerging, and you will see more and more of where two-wheelers will start to support DC charging and fast charging as well for people who are in a hurry. Of course, there is battery health impact when you do faster charging, at least with the current tech. And that's why usually there will be some recommendation provided by the OEM in terms of X number of DC charges for every AC charge. So by and large, most people just do AC charging and DC charging only when you're in a hurry, or if you're a fleet, if you're running a fleet. So that's with respect to the two-wheelers side. Coming to the four-wheelers part, again, typically the OEMs provide a portable charging cable that you can connect into a 15 amp socket and then connected to your vehicle. We would say the same in this case, more so in the case of four-wheelers, to use a smart socket for sure, which has additional safety. There's one short slide I have in terms of safety as well. I'll come back to that there. There One part is the 3.3 kilowatt socket, and all the vehicles will accept that amount of power into the batteries. But for if the batteries or the vehicles support even faster AC charging speeds, then there is a Type 2 connector typically that plugs into the vehicles. Then you can charge at 7 kilowatt, 11 kilowatt, and with few vehicles, even 22 kilowatt speed with respect to four-wheelers. And that for that you typically need a Type 2 connector. That's by and large the AC charging connector that's used in four-wheelers predominantly. And the last part is the DC charging for four-wheelers, of course, and there is a convergence towards the connector type called CCS2, the combined charging system standard Type 2 connector, which is a little bit of an extension to this with data cables, and that is predominantly used for the DC fast charging. There are some vehicles, and particularly some older fleet vehicles, that do use um, a different standard, a GB by T, or where that's kind of for older vehicles, there is slightly different standard, and typically you will find slightly even less expensive DC fast chargers for that standard as well. But all new vehicles we expect to adhere to the CCS2 standard going forward. That's with respect to the DC fast charging. Um, and I think just a couple of things around. So that's on the charging EVs by vehicles, the different types of charging, AC and DC charging. The same applies to four-wheelers as well. DC charging, it will affect battery health, as at least as of now. And coming to some, kind of insights on emerging EV charging behavior. So this is from some of our data at a weekly cut. And if you look at the energy consumption at a weekly level, I think no surprise as well. We have a lot of charging points, AC charging points, some DC charging points in public as well. And but if you still see a lot of the energy consumption still comes from people who are charging at homes. There is slight mapping issue with respect to the retail stores and offices. So the second highest is from office spaces, and then it's like retail stores, and some of our fleet deployments also contribute to the consumption here. And the second thing is by vehicle type. As you can see, obviously, no surprise that this more or less mirrors the adoption and corroborates to the EV sales trend that we've seen earlier on in the presentation, and a lot of sessions by two-wheelers, but the consumption of energy is a little lower because of the battery sizes. And three-wheelers, again, it's much higher. All the three-wheelers are used for commercial usage, so that is the reason why the charging times are much higher there. Four-wheelers, while the booking counts are low, at a weekly level, but the energy consumption is more because they consume more units. So that's just one charging behavior insight in terms of the vehicle types. And what about the day of week, right? So it's more or less consistent, but you can actually see that at the beginning of the week and at the end of the week there is slight spike, but not much to choose from. It's more or less consistent through the week. One thing to note though is that for a private EV user, it's typically cyclical. You do it once or twice a week. Most people do not charge every day. You charge once or twice a week and you're good to go for the week, and then you do it again once, or if you get an opportunity somewhere. In terms of the time of charging, that's one thing that is slightly interesting to see here, is that our initial assumption was, people will come back from work and then they will charge. But what you actually see is that, a lot of the charging also happens, from post lunch to the evening period. So that is kind of one, surprise for us as well in terms of like the charging behavior. Some part of it is driven by fleet, but it is still, a trend that is noteworthy. A lot of daily commuters also charge in the morning before they leave for work. That's just a few insights from at least our data, and some at least are punts for what we see at the future or what our data already tells us. So one part is, I think it's not just us. If you look at the reports published by OEMs, including four-wheeler OEMs, you would see, and it's more or less consistent with the global trends in terms of the customers prefer charging at home or office. Again, for the scope of discussion, I'm talking about private EV users. And what this also means is that it's predominantly AC charging at home or office. So basically, I'll come back to why it is predominantly AC charging, but it's not, it's not a difficult thing to guess either. And DC fast charging is typically used only on long trips or when you're in a rush, or you're an enthusiast, you just want to see your car or your vehicle get charged fast. And one thing that we've also seen is that once you have community charging in a particular place, whether it's an office or an existing residential building, it drives up the ownership. People actually see that there is a place for them to charge. Even if they are not able to set up charging at their own private parking lot, they still can have a place to charge, and that kind of gives them the confidence to uh, purchase an EV. And we've definitely seen that correlation in terms of places where we've set up charging versus the ownership trend in these places has a positive deviation beyond the growth rate of the sector as well. So it's, of course, it's true that the number of sales is growing as well, but it's more than that at the places where we have deployed charging versus where we have not. So that's one thing, that if you set up community charging, you expect the ownership to increase as well, and then you may need to add a few more charges and so on. What we are already seeing is that all new buildings, regardless of which state you're in, will provide some, some EV charging for sure. There's different levels in which, depending on the builder or the geography, etc., that they do this. But all new buildings, without fail, at least from a wiring perspective, are providing some sort of future proofing in terms of like EV charging. And while particularly a couple of years ago, when we spoke to a lot of workplaces, it was lukewarm. Now we know that every single workplace is, has already provided some sort of EV charging, or is in the process of providing EV charging and figuring out what's the right way to do it. So that's it's not a surprise, but just wanted to put it out there that every place we will come to expect EV charging at your place of work. So that's few kind of trends that we wanted to touch upon. And now, with respect to existing buildings and new buildings, what is the behavior today, or what is the status quo today, right? So for existing buildings, typically you do two things. One is you set up a common charging zone or a common charging hub for the residents at a common or a common parking area or a visitor parking area. And sometimes when individual residents also purchase a vehicle and they want a private charging installation, most communities also allow for that. In some cases, they don't allow you to draw your wire from the individual meter and set up private parking, but they say, hey, use the common charging hub and we'll plan for the future. So typically, this is what existing buildings are doing, the residential buildings. In the case of offices, they again provide, you provide a small hub for your employees to charge, one hub at your two-wheeler parking, one hub or a few chargers at your four-wheeler parking. And many offices also provide some charging provision, typically a DC charger for their employee transport fleet to charge as well when they're bringing in employees, or when they have to take them back home. This is typically what is happening. The couple of challenges with this also is that when you allow individual residents to have their individual chargers, many cases there is a certain common load that's been sanctioned when you construct the building, and that even if an individual is increasing the load for their own flat, it comes from that allocated capacity. And after a point, it is you run out of that capacity. So that's one concern that existing RWs have noticed. And the long-term answer will be to kind of increase spare load. We do see some communities also have um, bring in a transformer and take a separate connection. And if that state has an EV meter, take it in that EV meter connection and then provide this as individual chargers, which definitely is an option as the adoption within your community increases as well. And the next level of people, also there are some societies where typically what you see as a common charging hub typically means you have some sort of smart chargers there so that you can reconcile the number of units, who's charging, and take the payment, and so on. There are some buildings where they're still using common sockets for charging. The challenge with that being, safety is an issue, tracking usage is an issue. There is cases of power theft and overcharging, and all of these things. So most people have moved from this to the part that we see here. Of course, there are some existing buildings here and there where there is contention, and okay, we're not going to allow EV charging. That's all. Very few now, but they still exist in some pockets. With respect to new buildings, what's starting to happen, going back to what I said in terms of all workplaces, etc., and new builders also providing some sort of EV provision, is that they provide wiring and smart sockets for EV charging in a percentage of parking lots, typically 15-20%. Sometimes depends on regulation, sometimes depends on the conviction of the builder. And some provide these to the parking lots from common load, some provide it from the private individual meter load as well. And as residents start to come into the new buildings, they provide these either on a first come first serve basis, or sometimes you take lots and provide it. There are a few builders also where they're providing a smart socket in every parking lot as well, kind of future-proofing that to a whole new extent. The next level is, typically they provide the wiring and smart sockets in the common or visitor parking, but not in the private parking lot. So that's also, there are some new buildings that also get set up in this fashion. And of course, there are some where you provide only wiring, and then you let the resident purchase that EV charger from another source, or from uh, kind of like the vehicle manufacturer provides and bundles some sort of EV charging provision as well. Uh, Again, very few, but there are some new buildings that do not provide EV charging as well. And we hope that that stance changes very fast. From our vantage point, what we see is that new buildings are moving more and more into the first bucket here, where they're providing wiring and smart sockets in at least a percentage of the parking lots, and ideally from a common load, so that it gets far easier to manage later when the adoption is much higher as well. So that's a little bit of the status quo in terms of community charging across existing buildings and new buildings. What we recommend, if your building already doesn't have an EV charging provision, is to kind of first estimate the number of EVs. You could do a very short survey, or find a different way to estimate whether it's your employees or your residents, in terms of how many are planning to purchase an EV or how many you already have, and then estimate the power demand based on whether it's two-wheeler versus four-wheeler and so on. And then there are choices in terms of ownership and billing models. Typically, what happens is that if it's an existing building, the RWA kind of provides it as a managed EV charging facility. They usually give that as a contract to a provider like Bolt Earth and others, for that to be managed and the entire billing, etc., to be taken care of. Usually, some of them also charge a small markup to manage expenses, or and give it at cost in terms of like the electricity and the software margins, etc. And based on that, we kind of recommend the ownership and the billing models as well, and then figure out whether you want to start with a common hub or a zone, or you want to provide it, if the demand you expect it to be very high. There are some provisions where you can then exchange some slots and provide EV owners parking facility at one location, so that then the wiring and all of that can be easier. So there's different options in terms of what can be done there. So this is in terms of like just even assessing for demand and what the requirements for your own building. And you can look at it in phases, right? So in phase one, if the adoption is very low, maybe I'd be very surprised if any of the buildings have less than 1-2% adoption. But if it's very low, then you can start by setting up some common charging facility, typically just AC charging. Like I said, most of the charging at home and office will be AC charging. In fact, we did have some corporates, for instance, ask for quotations for 100 DC charging stations, but we kind of work with them to help them understand what the charging behavior and our own learnings, etc., and help them arrive at what is the kind of charging estimation that you need to do. So this is at the very minimum, we say a small charging zone or a hub with a common charging facility, AC charging. And as the adoption grows a little bit, again, like we said, once you have some charging, you can expect the EV ownership to go up a little bit. And once it crosses a certain threshold and you see more four-wheelers also be there, you can add the level 2 chargers, which is the AC level 2 chargers for four-wheelers as well, whether it's in common, or you can provide that for individual parking lots as well. And you can kind of start to provide charging facility in individual parking lots, ideally still from a common load, and then collect the input electricity costs and so on. And for future proofing, what we'd recommend is to kind of retrofit a power source and then have this provision in all parking lots, ideally with a common load and with a dedicated EV connection. Take advantage of the EV meter. Most discoms have committed to providing EV meter connections and making it easy. Some states more than the other, but that is something that is going to happen. For discoms, after refrigeration, EV charging is the biggest tech shift that has happened, and they're gearing up to work towards these as well. And then just have at least at each parking lot, at the minimum, have like a charging smart socket which has metering. And over time, when the load is high, you will actually see that you will need load balancing. You will need to upgrade to a smart meter and look at the spare load, and then ensure that the power output to the EV charging of the vehicle is tempered accordingly, looking at peak times and so on as well. And if the society or the office has more than 500 parking lots, then it does warrant having a DC fast charging as well, just more as a opportunity charging, or for people when they're in a rush and so on. So that's kind of one way to look at it. And most people also ask what is the charger to vehicle ratio. And for two-wheelers to start with, we at least say 1:10 is the bare minimum, and for four-wheelers is 1:20. And this one means one level one charger and one level two charger at the minimum. So that kind of one way to start as a starting point. And we also recommend having smart devices that where you can monitor um, the charging to kind of keep improving, in terms of what you're providing to the residents or the employees as well. So some sort of a charging management system where you can create closed user groups. In all community charging, typically, you would want to create a closed user group and provide access to only the authorized people, authorized residents, or authorized employees to be able to access the chargers. So with the charging management software, it's very easy to kind of configure the closed user group, and then also keep adding it, removing people as transitions happen. You can, as adoption increases, we'll all also have differential pricing, and there are some discounts looking at solar tariff, and soon we'll have like some sort of dynamic tariff as well, and that's the place where there can be differential pricing in terms of like the time of day, or the type of charger, and so on. You can configure timings of the chargers and all of that, look at analytics, what is the usage, what's an appropriate time you should plan for increased number of chargers to be there, and also reconcile power bills, look at any pending tickets in terms of like payments getting stuck, and all of those things are very easy with respect to when you actually have smart chargers which link to a charging management system such as this, which becomes an easy dashboard. And B2B workflows are also easier. If you have a facilities manager, then you can provide certain levels of access to that person versus full access to some administrators, and so on. So that's a quick, this is obviously not exhaustive, but this is at least, bare minimum that we see already offices and residential RWA members or builders start to use. Um, Coming to the safety and compliance standards, there are some standards that have already been defined. At the minimum, what you would want to look at is if you're taking some sort of charging equipment, it needs to have some earth presence detection, safety in terms of overcurrent, short circuit, undercurrent, surge protection, temperature, ingress protection, and weatherproofing, particularly if it's going to be in open areas. This is for the charging of the smart sockets, and typically you can also see if they adhere to the standards, IS standards by CEA. And there are some government standards as well. Some of them make sense, some of them may not make sense for community charging. But you can also see if there are certain government standards that are met in terms of EVSE and the likes. And there are some data privacy laws that you should look at if there is data of your residents or employees that are looking at as well, in terms of like GDPR readiness and VAPT, so basically vulnerability and penetration testing that the provider is doing. So that's another thing to look at. ISO standards, and if you look at these safety features, ideally you would want to look at reports from NABL certified labs that okay, these features indeed work in those devices. There are some ARI certified charging as well, typically that you could look at if you need that with respect to the compliance, particularly if you're an office and so on, right? So that's a quick snapshot in terms of what to look for in terms of like the charging devices, the standards and the certifications, and also the data privacy standpoint. I think might be speaking to the choir here, but again, maybe just a minute on what is the benefit to having like EV charging provider if you are an RWA or a new building. And of course, it is something we already discussed, that it's a point of no return, and we see that most have adopted in some form or the other. But what we can tend to miss sometimes is the social and the environmental contribution in terms of like the tailpipe emissions and moving towards clean mobility. There are a whole set of misconceptions in that, and we can get into that in the Q&A if there's time. But as we've seen, there are growing mandates as well that we need to look at, and you can make some income from marking up the electricity, a small part, to continue to provide the services, have facilities person maintaining them, and so on as well. And at a workplace level, almost all companies have some sort of like net zero commitments and sustainability goals. And a big part of that is employee transport fleets, how employees, reach the office, and how your own fleets or logistics fleets and so on also look at that. And that is something that uh, most workplaces are looking at as well. Just couple of I think we're coming towards the end of the formal presentation at least, and so just as examples of in terms of how we've supported some community charging in offices. This is SAP Labs, where we've set up about 50 slow chargers and fast chargers as well across their campuses for their employees. And this is Bank of America, again, 50 level 2 chargers for four-wheelers in the four-wheeler parking, and 100 level 1 chargers in the two-wheelers parking space. And that is now being used, that is being accessed by about 30,000 employees, and there is a small subset of that who have EVs now and are taking advantage of that. This is in Shobha Properties, and that's where the new building having the private socket is the smart socket is something that we are looking at. This is across multiple properties with Shobha Group. They've definitely been visionary in terms of providing this as a facility to the uh, incoming residents of those properties as well. There are many others. I mean, this slide keeps falling behind our deployments as Bolt Earth at least, and there's workplaces across the country, and we're now in about 2,500 plus residential communities and 150 plus offices and tech parks. And even in public, we work with metro authorities and OMCs and the likes, highway operators, to provide public charging as well. Quick snapshot of the some of the deployments and what they look like. This is like a two-wheeler parking hub, and this is like a private parking for in a residential deployment. This is like a level 2 charger. Again, some more offices and kind of create like green hubs or EV charging zones. Um, yeah, so that's kind of a quick snapshot of what it looks like in reality as well. So yeah, and I think we are bang on at the 1 hour mark, and wanted to at least end the formal presentation and not bore you with more uh, kind of one way talk. While it is an, listen only presentation, I would love to see if there is some engagement in terms of like Q&A, or, any issues that you might be facing that we should take cognizance of when you look at community charging for your own communities, or if you have suggestions in terms of what we could do better. Are we missing something? Or would love to get some thoughts. I think Gandharv already has posted one question. I'll address that, but wanted to kind of invite the group to kind of see if there's any questions, thoughts, discussion, debate up for it for the next 15 minutes at least. If there's none, of course, we can still conclude this, and you can get in touch with us. I've put my mail ID as well as a common mail ID. If you have any further questions, thoughts, feedback. Would love to hear all about it. Once again, anyway, thanks for joining. And yeah, if you have questions, please post them in the chat. So while others figure out whether they want to spend more time on this and post questions, I'll look at Gandharv's question. So Gandharv asks that in comparison to residential charging, what are the key differentiators and advantages of commercial EV charging solutions? Could you elaborate on the typical target customer base for these commercial charging stations? So um, yeah, I think Gandharv, correct me if I'm wrong, and please type it out. When you say commercial EV charging solutions, you mean public EV charging in commercial places? It could be the likes of malls or other commercial establishments. If my understanding is correct, I'm going to answer that. I'm going to go with that understanding and answer that. If it's different, please type it out in the chat box. So essentially, the way to look at it is from what do you say, the user or the consumer point of view, right? So the way behavior is evolving is that if you're a personal EV user, then you okay, so you charge at home or office predominantly, and most people do not go ahead and purchase an EV unless they're sure that they have a place to charge, at least at your personal parking lot, or there is some, if you live in a multi-family residential apartment, you have some sort of common charging provision or something. Only then, people get that confidence to kind of at least a 5 amp socket, which we discussed as not the ideal option, but even if that's there, you'll go ahead and purchase the EV, right? So that's how that is the 90% of the behavior. Now, I'll eventually what we think will happen is that there will be opportunity charging that will happen more and more. Let's say you go to a mall and you realize, oh, there's a charging here. So though you did not go there to charge, since you're anyway there, you'll put it on charge, watch a movie or go for shopping or something. The same thing may happen at gyms and cafes and restaurants and so on. Today, the public charging at these sort of places is predominantly used by commercial fleets, where they have to charge in between, or by people who have very low charge and they're nervous, right? Like let's say I'm below 20% charge, I have a few more kilometers to go, and I'm like, okay, why take a chance? I'm gonna park at this cafe and charge for a bit and then go. Today, a lot of these are a mix of AC and DC charging, regardless of whether it's two-wheeler or four-wheeler. But more and more, as more two-wheelers also start to support DC charging, in public, most people will do DC charging. And AC charging will only be there where someone goes for at least more than, or you park your vehicle for more than 4 hours. That's where AC charging will still be there. Like in your office, you can have DC charging, but in the morning you go there, let's say you put it on charge, and you finish DC charging in, let's say, an hour. You don't want to get up from your meeting or your work and then go down, remove the vehicle from that because there's another vehicle that has charged there. So there, you will just put it on charge, forget about it, you take it out when you're going out for lunch or at the end of the day. So this is the behavior in like a home or an office. But in commercial charging stations, yes, the typical customer base is today commercial fleets that still do AC charging. We have some AC charging sockets for outside customers in our basement of our office, and there is a couple of three-wheeler folks who come every day during lunch and then plug it in, sleep in the vehicle, go have lunch, come back, and then they take their vehicle for their informal second shift, right? And there are some two-wheelers who come to the cafe opposite to our office and then they park it here, put it on charge, and then go have a coffee, come back, pick up their vehicle and go. So, but by and large, today it is commercial vehicles in terms of two-wheelers, three-wheelers that use AC charging. What it will move towards is more DC charging in public. So four-wheelers and the likes as well. Your you know uh, four-wheelers that are your taxis and your employee transport fleets, all of those will start to use the uh, commercial public charging as such. This will happen in two ways. One is in defined hubs where they leave their vehicle overnight in AC charging itself, or they do it at home, or it will happen also at distributed fleet charging places as well for commercial fleets. So that's two ways that that's happening. Hope that answers the question, Gandhar. Uh, Kapadia has a question. Do you suggest we purchase the chargers or go for OPEX model for our department? I think it's a good question, and we keep hearing this a lot. Um, what we suggest is to kind of purchase the chargers. These are low cost enough. Typically, you don't need more than level one chargers. This offers greater control as well as limit the expense for the end customer, which is your residents, in terms of how much they're paying. So because usually these smart sockets are around the 5,000 mark, and you will not start off with them in every parking lot. And for a common hub of five, etc., the capex is still pretty low, and that's we recommend that so that then customers are not paying for the recovery of that capex from providers such as us by paying a much bigger markup in terms of the per unit electricity when they charge. So that's our recommendation, at least. And let me know if that answers your question, or you want to talk about it more. We can also take it offline. Um, Ankit, how long does it take to charge an EV? Yeah, so basically, it depends on a lot of factors. So one is AC charging versus DC charging. So if it is AC charging, it is often also limited by, particularly in the case of two-wheelers, it's limited by the portable charger or your off-board or on-board charger that allows certain amount of power to go to your battery. So typically two-wheelers are somewhere between 750 to 950 watts. So while I'm providing more current, the battery doesn't accept that much because it's limited by that. Now, so it depends on that. The second part is, let us say if it takes everything, then the base calculation is battery capacity you need to get by the rating of the charger. Sometimes it's limited by the onboard off-board charger, or what is the max. You can see it as the power rating or the charging capacity in the vehicle brochures. And but having said that, that's a very crude way of calculation. It also depends on various factors such as efficiency from the grid to the vehicle, particularly in DC charging, the temperature, what is the SOC of your charging. There is typically a graph. It's you take faster charge when the SOC is low, and as it reaches the 80% mark, then it starts to charge much slower. So it's kind of dependent on some of these factors, the ambient temperature, all of these are typically factors to look at, how to, or how much time does it take to charge an EV. Is it possible to, Tinto has a question, is it possible to install Volt Earth Lite for a domestic connection in a house and make it available for public? So today, at least, what you can do is only share power on a commercial connection. This is according to the Ministry of Power guidelines. So you can do that from a commercial connection. Uh, at least you can't do formal transactions. It's a gray area, but you cannot do formal transactions and sell power from domestic connection. But if your friend is coming home and then they want to charge and you still want to see how much they have charged, you can share it, but you can't resell power from domestic connections. What you can do is, in a commercial place, if EV meter is there, then you can take an EV meter connection and then set it up as a public charging point. So it is usually less than the domestic connection tariff. So in Delhi, for example, if you take that connection, EV meter connection, it's 4.5 rupees. In Bangalore, it is 5.5 rupees and so on. So that's one way to bring it cheaper. There is a little bit of security deposit and usually some paperwork, but discounts are getting better about it. I hope that answers your question, Tinto. Vinay, two-wheeler AC fast charging device compatibility. Um, AC fast charging. See, AC fast charging in two-wheelers is typically, there is no Type 2 connector standard like in the case of four-wheelers. It's typically you plug into a 3-pin smart socket or an industrial smart socket that we kind of saw in the presentation earlier. And so AC fast charging is typically also limited by again that onboard offboard charger. So if you some two-wheeler OEMs are providing portable chargers or offboard charging capacity of almost up to 4 kilowatt as well, but usually that depends on the OEM. So I would say question best left to the OEM itself. In terms of compatibility, it still comes with a 3-pin plug or an industrial plug. But by and large, it's a 3-pin plug that still connects. And then the fast charging is driven by the box that is the rectifier that converts DC to AC power. So that's a quick answer to the question. Um, I think Gandhar has a question, keen interest in this field. Yeah, so good to know about your interest. So lots is happening on the highways as well. So one thing that you see is that almost about close to 3 to 4,000 fast charging stations have already been set up just by the ONCs, the likes of IOCL, HPCL, BPCL, and so on their fuel stations, both within cities and on the highways as well. And the second thing that's happening is there are a lot of charge point operators like Bolter that deploy these along the highways. One thing that is happening though is that the slight shift in behavior is if it's a fuel station in the past when you have to stop on a highway, you stop at a fuel station, you get a quick fuel and then you go on your way. But now with DC fast charging there is a little bit of planning that's still required, and battery capacities also keep increasing. So the what will happen is that now every highway dhaba pit stop will start to have a DC fast charging station. So the behavior that is emerging is that people, anyway stop for a break and or stop to get DC fast charging at a place which has good toilets. You can get a quick bite, and other things, right? So some sort of amenities need to be around the fast charging station, or people with amenities will also set up a fast charging station and start to give fuel to vehicles that move along the highway. So that's kind of what we already know is happening. So a lot of the OMCs and the pet fuel stations also are starting to have more and more amenities, a small supermarket, good toilets, and so on. So it's moving both ways. And today, depending on battery capacity, most people take their, unless you're a real enthusiast, take it only about 250 kilometers or so, sorry, 500 kilometers or so. But as battery capacities improve, you can take it on longer distances as well. There are some, so one is the average commuter who's going on the highway. The second also is that there are some intercity travel operators that have already started, both in four-wheelers and buses and some trucks as well, starting to use these fast charging stations, and that is very exciting as well. So predominantly these started off with twin cities, Delhi, Jaipur, Mumbai, Pune, Hyderabad, Vijayawada, Bangalore, Mysore, and the like. So that they're shorter and more defined in that sense. But that will kind of grow from there. And a lot of these commercial fleets operating between cities will also start to utilize DC fast charging stations similar to fuel stations. Uh, yeah, I think so. I'll just check with my team if we can send across the presentation at least to the attendees and the recorded version if possible. Okay, with just a little over time. I will answer this as the last question, Rasut Goda. Uh, so yes, I think it's a good question. While tailpipe emissions are zero for EVs, if you are going to charge them from conventional fuel sources, then what is the point? The truth is that there's two aspects to this. At a grid level, about 40% of our grid is renewable in India, net, right? It's different in different states. In states like Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, etc., it's more than 50%. It's coming from renewable sources to the grid. So as we speak, the grid is also getting cleaner. There are multiple initiatives and a commitment in terms of renewable energy, in terms of gigawatts by 2030, a huge one that we have. And the second part is that is at a macro level. At a residential apartment or like commercial building sort of level, what is already starting to happen is that there is certain net metering at play where you have some sort of solar on the rooftop or something, and then you have the charging, and then the net metering kind of offsets that. But it is true, more kind of solar linked initiatives have to pick up as well. And yeah, at a micro level, the only issue, Bhuvan, is um, storage. So if you have solar, you need to have a storage unit. So at what scale does it warrant is something that we're all discovering together. And I think we will find out that answer soon. But there are enough, there's enough tech, etc. It's more on a viability level. At what scale does it warrant is the question. There are some very interesting things happening also in terms of like settlements at a virtual grid level as well. That's great to know, Rasut. We'll definitely be in touch and figure out if there's a way that we can make more and more EV charging um, powered by renewable sources as well. That will further reduce, emissions. So all for it. Thank you so much for attending, and I hope this was somewhat useful, and happy to take more conversations offline as it warrants. Thank you so much. Have a good evening and great end to the week. Thank you.